Hello, everyone, and welcome to Industry Insights by G2, which features hot takes and actionable advice from business leaders around the world. This is a professional spotlight with Melissa Rosenthal, the co-founder of Outlever, a company that opens new marketing and sales channels for ROI-focused B2B and B2C brands. My name is Alexandra Vasquez, a senior content marketing specialist at G2. And I'm so excited to share this interview with you all and to speak with you today. Melissa, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Today, Melissa and I will be discussing her journey to building Outlever, how her previous roles led her to co-found her own company, and why brands need to own the news and content that they align with. But before we jump into all those topics, how about some icebreaker questions?
Let's do it.
In the fashion of our newsletter G2T, we'd love to ask, what is your favorite beverage?
Oh, my favorite beverage. So it's coffee. I have this issue where if I'm getting low on coffee, I have to have another one, even if it's not completely done. And then I usually don't finish the old one. So it's a bit of an issue because I have like all these half drank coffees in my fridge. But yes, coffee and espresso is my number one.
I love it. You gotta drop the order. What's the order?
It's an iced doppio in a grande cup with extra ice and a drop of almond milk.
Perfect. That sounds amazing. Love the extra ice, by the way. I'm a big
Oh
I'm a
yeah.
big ice person as well. So now getting a little more professional about it. What was your very first job and what were some things you learned from it?
Well, my very first job was an intern at BuzzFeed. So it kind of parlayed itself pretty well into a big phase of my career. I learned a lot. I went from being an intern to managing a 150 person team globally. So the learnings are kind of infinite from that role. I learned really like how and why people connect with content, what makes them take that extra action rather than just viewing something to share it with someone that they know. And it taught me just kind of fundamentally like why people connect with things. What are the reasons emotionally that content resonates with humans? And I think that kind of made it really like was the blueprint into the rest of my entire career.
Amazing. That's great. I'm glad to hear that from a young age you were so passionate about content. That's really exciting. Next question. What are some of your best time management hacks?
Time management hacks. I love time blocking. I think it's really important. Like I'll do it just on my own calendar where I like block out time for deep work. It's sort of I follow my calendar like religiously. So if I have time for that, it just makes me kind of shut my laptop and like focus on what I need to focus on. It's very hard to do deep work. I've like tried a million different ways, but if you keep Slack open and you have a team and people are slacking you, it's just that hour, that 2 hours that you block off goes away really quickly. So I've learned to kind of shut my laptop, go and sit with a notebook, think about the things that I need to think about, come back, or just like sometimes I'll even uninstall Slack or just really mute myself, just depending upon what I really need to get done. But time blocking is really efficient for me. And then I love ClickUp. I still love ClickUp. I work there, but ClickUp is really a great time management tool. It just kind of helps me understand like what's pressing, what I need to do now, what's coming up, and just kind of understanding where things sit.
Great, great. Well, since you mentioned ClickUp, would you consider that your favorite software in your stack, or do you want to shout out anything else?
That's a good question. I mean, ClickUp is like the backbone of our entire company. Like everything goes through ClickUp. If it's not in ClickUp, it doesn't really like exist. So yeah, I mean, I don't think we could operate without a work management tool, and ClickUp is just really kind of instrumental in everything that we do.
Great, awesome. And then the last of our warm-up questions. Everybody has their line, at work. So, what kind of problems make you want to just like throw laptop out the window, you're done?
Oof. Now being like a founder of a company, it's the small things I think that like the like billing issues or this or like the small things that I guess like don't matter just make me crazy because I want to focus on like the things that actually do make an impact. I love like seeing things happen and it's the stuff that like is just crucial but like not not like important to the core of what you're building. You know, those are the things I think that like annoy me now. In roles where like I was a part of a large organization, I would say like, you know, corporate jargon and like meetings for meetings for meetings. Like if you're gonna have a pre-meeting for another meeting to have the decision meeting, like that would make me want to throw my laptop out the window. Like we don't need three meetings to make a decision, you know?
That's a good one. That is a very good one. Very much this meeting could have been an email kind of stuff.
Yes, yes, exactly.
Amazing. So I would love to jump into the nitty-gritty of your expertise now.
Yeah,
When we were talking a little bit back and forth about what we wanted to discuss today, you said something that I thought was really interesting, and I'd love to dive right into it.
good.
You mentioned that the current sales motion is broken. Can you explain what that means to you and why you think that is?
Yeah, I mean, I think that for a long time, let's just say cold outbound, people were pretty prescriptive and thoughtful with the right place, right message, right time. And I think people were not used to cold outbound in like a thoughtful way, so it worked. And I think, you know, when you do hit that right person with the right message, like it's great. Like it can be a great tool and a great method. I think with the growth at all costs kind of way of operating that we saw a few years ago, where every company just hired a huge outbound team, a huge mid-market team, and all of a sudden, you know, it was like spray and pray. Like we will do whatever we need to just grow. We sort of lost like the thoughtfulness that went into the motion previously. And now with AI, I think it's even gotten to a new level where people are coming up with automated sequences that are bizarre. You know, I think like they're just leveraging AI being like, you know, do research on what this person last posted. But I've seen such wild things where someone was referencing like someone's like personal tragedy in like an outbound email. And it was like, you know, use our tool while you grieve. It was just, I mean, you know, like I had to say this example because I just can't see a more poignant example of like why this is a broken motion. When you're getting into that territory, it's like this like understanding of what personalization means is completely broken, right? We've kind of like just destroyed it. So that's why I think it's pretty broken. I also think like hitting the right person at the right time, like through outbound is so hard. And there's that 364 days a year where they're not buying. So why don't we give them value? Why don't we provide value for them? Why don't we create a relationship with them and actually like build something rather than trying to sell them immediately? So I think that the future of what that motion looks like is much more relationship building, which is what it should have been from day one.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. And I think a big part of that building that relationship from the beginning is even before you start the conversation. It's really how people perceive your brand. So why do you think that it's so important for companies to take ownership of the news and the content that they align with?
Yeah, I mean, you know, from my early days and kind of at BuzzFeed all the way to Cheddar, you know, this is I feel like what my next step was here was kind of the culmination of a lot of things I've seen across my career. You know, at being one of the earliest employees at BuzzFeed and then helping launch Cheddar, my goal was always to create this compelling content that brands want to align themselves and give them a distinct voice in market. And then transitioning from B to B2B SaaS, I saw how challenging it is, like firsthand, for companies to be able to reach their core customers at scale, especially efficiently. So what we're doing at Outlever is really kind of born out of the desire to solve that problem. We want companies to be able to become that authority in their space, create content that matters, both to them, but also their customers at scale. So it's less about like, you know, creating a blog about what you do every day, but it's like, how do you enter the conversations that your customers are having? How do you create value for them, what they care about, really speak to them, not like, you know, bottom of funnel, high intent blog content, but really like that trusted voice and giving them a platform to be able to elevate them. I think it's really important because that's something that you can't be really taken away from you when you start to build the IP yourself. If you're borrowing a voice of another publication, or you're borrowing, I feel like everything is a borrowed timeline. It's like media is flighted, everything is borrowed. This is ownership. I think like being able to take ownership of something and build it into the core motion of what you are as a company, what you stand for, who you elevate, is just now core to, it's going to be, if not already, is core to kind of any sort of motion of what gives a company credibility and what they speak to and what their customers care about.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned Cheddar and previously mentioned ClickUp. Now, those were two really big roles in your career that I would love to touch on. You were the CRO of Cheddar and the CCO of ClickUp. How did your experiences building those brands influence your approach to co-founding Outlever?
Yeah, I mean, at kind of as I mentioned, the at Cheddar, we were specifically building this very high caliber content with executives from tech and media companies, and finance companies, around the fact that we wanted to create this credible, trusted voice so that advertisers could work with us, so that we could sell into B2B. And I always just saw that motion as like it's a 3 month flight, it's a 2 week flight, it's a this flight. And it was just like, how do you have that but 24/7? And it's obviously very hard for a company internally to be able to build that themselves. But I was always just like, why do we create something that they need to borrow? Like, why wouldn't they want to own that themselves? Like, that's such a core part of what brand is. So that was very kind of crucial to my thinking on like that there's a need to be solved for there. And then at ClickUp, we grew very fast. We had a very large marketing budget. We were able to do a lot of really great things. We bought cool billboards. We had a great billboard strategy, a very robust SEO strategy. I mean, everything in performance marketing. And we were able to build brand through these channels. But once again, it like a lot of that is paid. A lot of that is like it diminishes over time. It's when you're not spending the millions of dollars that you were, you lose that traction in some capacity. So the thought was like, I wish I had something like that there, where we owned it 24/7. We were publishing 24/7, and we were having those conversations. So a lot of that, like just the kind of culmination of these, like, oh, interesting, we're building this to sell this to B2B brands. And then as a B2B marketer, wow, it's really challenging to create demand, to build brand, to do all of these things efficiently, and scalably over time, where the asset just becomes more valuable. It doesn't diminish over time because you're not putting the same money into the machine. It just grows in value, grows in credibility. So I wanted to build something that kind of could stand the test of time, could become a core value and a core asset for a company to help them build brand, create demand, and then really rethink that outbound strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a perfect segue to my next question. Did a little research on Outlever and I learned a lot about what your mission is, which is primarily to help brands be the number one news source in their industry.
Yep.
How do you help B2B companies do something like that? I think a lot of the time B2B companies don't see themselves in those spaces. So how does Outlever um, help B2B companies make sure that they're having those conversations that matter most to customers?
Yeah. So what we've built is sort of this really, really robust media listening algorithm that listens to hundreds of millions of signals a day across like everything: LinkedIn, podcast, Reddit, the corners of the internet that you might not think people are having conversations, but they are. And what we've been able to do is really kind of align the customers that we have and the stories and the signals that we get with what they should align themselves with, and then what their customers are already talking about, and sort of triangulate news content that way. We call it account-based media, is what we're calling it. So we're thinking about, okay, who are the ICPs you want to reach and what are they talking about? And how do we feed them the content that they would be valuable to elevate through thought leadership? So it's really like, how do we get people talking in your space? And how do we create you as your own dream trade publication? Those sniper shots of trying to get into Bloomberg and TechCrunch and all of these things, maybe that happens, but maybe it doesn't. Like, you should be the ones building this trade publication. There's no reason why you can't as that company. So why don't we amplify the things that your customers care about, like the things that are happening in their industry, the things that you want to highlight as a company yourself, and really kind of build this very horizontal trade publication approach. That's how we think about it.
Yeah, and I think it's really, really exciting to hear how you're using automation at Outlever. And I think, I mean, you touched on it already, but AI is kind of top of mind for all industries. Being more specific on when it comes to content creation, how do you see automation playing a role in the future of specifically editorial content?
Yeah, that's a great question. So first of all, AI, like, the media listing algorithm that we have, like AI is the core piece of how we analyze this data so quickly too. Being able to parse it out and understand signals that are then attached to not only our customers, but our customers' core ICPs could not be done without AI. So it's definitely fundamentally like this matching of signals with content that it does an amazing job at. From there, AI, we've built kind of this prompt engine that is able to create like a first pass at what an Axios style news article looks like. So it's really like, this kind of, it's kind of like Grammarly for news content and news editing. So it plays 20 questions with itself and then gives us kind of rationale of this or this, this or this, this or this. And the way that we kind of begin to think about it, the smarter it gets over time, which is great. So right now, that's sort of like the first pass, and then we have real journalists from New York Times, Bloomberg, CNN kind of come in and then edit that piece, add perspective, add the thought leadership that we're getting from ICPs, and put that into the article and spin it. But AI is super core in that first pass of the article, and it's amazing how smart it is. Like it gets smarter every day with more that we feed into it. Like the model keeps just kind of getting better at understanding what we need, how we position things. It's starting to reason with itself, and that's something we haven't seen before. So it's pretty amazing, like how it makes decisions. You ask it how it made this decision, and it tells you. And the thought process of the AI prompting that we're using now, it is starting to think like a journalist, which is wild to me. If we're here now, the future is really bright for that. I don't know if you saw Google's LM notebook, but you feed it. I fed it 3 articles about what we do, and it created this 20-minute podcast with 2 people just fluently discussing our core value proposition, how we think about things in a way that, I mean, if you would send that to anyone, they really wouldn't be able to tell probably until like minute 2, like that it was AI created. So I think we're at a really kind of interesting like crux in like in content creation and where AI takes it. I know there's a lot of trepidation right now and skepticism with AI driven content, but what I'm seeing and what we're seeing on our end is really promising with where it goes. It's getting better.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you brought up something that's really important to touch on, which is that skepticism. I think a lot of general population and customers have made it very clear that they have certain expectations for brands and their transparency when it comes to AI. So how do you foresee those expectations in like changing in the future? And then how do companies like Outlever help clients, navigate that environment?
I mean, that's honestly the first question on every call. It's what is the role of AI and like how do you maintain quality? Right now, like it is definitely in that mix of like man and machine for better words. Like it's definitely like the pairing, but the goal is for the AI to make our journalists way more efficient. That's like how we view it right now. And we're very transparent that AI just the first draft, but then it's human from there. I think over time, there will be, the people that are skeptics about it kind of don't see what we're seeing on our end with what we're building. And I think over time, it's going to get really hard to tell if a journalist or if AI wrote it. In maybe a good way where like I don't, it's a good question. It really is. Like, I think when AI isn't jumping the shark and making crazy errors and using the same word 5 times, you're going to start to not really be able to tell the difference. Which, I mean, every industry is kind of grappling with, right? It's like Hollywood is thinking about how do they deal with this, tech spaces. But I think in terms of, like, it's going to be when it gets really, really good, the challenge will be like how do you add human perspective into things? And I think that's like where we think about it. Like the story is a story, the AI prompting and the generation of the content and the journalist, like it's great, but where that like that thing that you can't change and you can't take away is that human perspective. So that's really what we lean into after like we generate the article. It's what does this ICP and this thought leader think about this news article? Because it is, the news is the news. And whether AI wrote the news or a person wrote the news, it's short form, what you need to know. Like that's how I believe people consume content. Like I don't want to read a 5,000 word article unless it's like something really deep on a topic I really care about. Otherwise, I kind of just, what do I need to know right now? What does it matter? Why does it matter to me? And what is the perspective of the person that I'm looking to, who's being elevated? So that's really where we think there's like that opportunity to kind of massage like human intelligence and perspective with machine and with AI.
Amazing. Yeah, I completely agree. And to close us out, I'd love to throw one more question at you.
Yeah.
You've had such a robust career, and I'm sure you've learned so much. So if you could give any advice to somebody who's kind of earlier in their career of in content marketing or just kind of in that space at all, if you could talk to internet BuzzFeed, Melissa, what are some things that you would tell them to keep in mind going into that space?
Yeah, I mean, I think keep a pulse on the future. If things stay stagnant for too long, you're probably not headed in the right direction. Um, I would say trust your gut. Like if you keep seeing something and it's there's repetition and pattern within what you're seeing, trust yourself. There are a lot of times that I look to people that I thought were visionaries because I was like, they must know better. But the reality was what I was thinking was right all along. And I think that's a very important thing. I think people like maybe the idea of imposter syndrome is actually less like you don't feel like you belong, but that you can't trust yourself. And I think the more that you trust yourself, the more that goes away, especially when you are right more times than you're not. So I'd say just maybe, start thinking about the patterns that you see and start to trust those patterns and question things. I think I wish I questioned things more often, which kind of led me to like why I created what I created now. Like this is the culmination of a lot of questions I've been asking myself that have been like, there is no solution for this over time. Okay, this is the frustration. This doesn't feel like outbound should be this should be the future of outbound. There's going to be diminishing returns on this. Like media is not efficient. Like, how do we bring all these things together? And I think I got to the point where I was like, I need to solve this because no one else is doing it and no one else sees it the way I do. So I think like collecting patterns over time and trusting yourself is really important. And the more you trust yourself, the less you feel like an imposter.
That was amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. And that wraps up our professional spotlight with Melissa Rosenthal, co-founder of Outlever. For more industry insights content like this, please visit our blog at learn.chitu.com/tag/industry-insights. See you next time, and thank you so much again, Melissa.
Thank you again.